I sat in my workshop, the scent of cedar and sea salt drifting through the cracked window. The Maine wind howled outside, rattling the old panes of this converted garage I'd turned into my sanctuary. My hands moved over a block of walnut carving delicate grooves with a chisel, each stroke a quiet rebellion against the chaos in my heart. On the workbench, glinting under the lamplight, was the bronze key. Small, worn with a clover-shaped bow, it had belonged to my mother. She'd given it to me before she passed, saying, "Nora, this key doesn't open any door you can see. It opens you." I used to roll my eyes at her cryptic wisdom, but tonight I clutched it like a lifeline. My name is Nora Callahan, and I'm 42 years old. For 15 years, I've been married to Ethan, a man who once looked at me like I was the only star in his sky. We met in a Portland coffee shop, me sketching furniture designs on a napkin, him spilling his latte, and stammering an apology that turned into an hour-long conversation. He was a banker, all crisp suits and quiet ambition, while I was the dreamer carving wood into tables and chairs that people in our coastal town of Harpswell bought for their summer homes. Back then, he loved my quirky passion. He'd sit in my workshop watching me sand a tabletop and say, "You make the world more beautiful, Nora." I believed him. I believed in us. But somewhere along the line, the man who used to bring me wildflowers from the cliffs started coming home with excuses instead. Late meeting, he'd mutter, tossing his keys on the counter. Client dinner, he'd say, avoiding my eyes. His suits got sharper, his smiles rarer. My workshop, once our shared haven, became my refuge alone. I'd carve late into the night, the rhythmic scrape of tools drowning out the silence of our two-bedroom cottage. Ethan stopped asking about my work. Last month, when I showed him a chair I'd spent weeks perfecting with inlaid maple swirls like ocean waves, he barely glanced up from his phone. "Looks nice," he said, then added, "but it's not like it pays the bills right." His words landed like a splinter under my skin. I'd always known my craft didn't bring in much $15,000 last year, barely enough to cover materials and utilities. Ethan's banking job kept us comfortable, and I was grateful. But gratitude doesn't soften the sting of being called a hobbyist in your own home. I started to wonder if he saw me at all anymore, or if I'd become just another piece of furniture, functional, familiar, forgettable. The bronze key felt warm in my palm as I set the chisel down. Mom used to say it was a reminder to unlock my own strength, but I hadn't felt strong in years. I felt small, like the shavings curling on the floor. Ethan's comments had piled up, each one heavier than the last. "Why don't you get a real job?" he'd said, at dinner last week, fork scraping his plate. "Something stable like Claire at the bank. She's killing it in investments." Claire. The name kept creeping into our conversations, always with a hint of admiration Ethan no longer spared for me. I'd never met her, but I pictured her in a sleek blazer hair, perfect confidence radiating. Everything I wasn't. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was just work stress, that Ethan was tired, that I was reading too much into his late nights and locked phone. But doubt is a stubborn thing. It grows in the quiet moments when you're scrubbing dishes alone or folding his shirts while he's at the office on a Saturday. I started noticing things, a faint whiff of perfume on his scarf, not mine. A receipt for a wine bar in Brunswick tucked in his coat pocket, dated for a night he'd said he was with colleagues. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I was too afraid of the truth, or maybe of what it would mean to admit I'd been living a lie. Tonight, though, something shifted. I was sanding a table leg when I heard the front door slam. Ethan's footsteps were heavy and patient. "Nora!" he called, voice clipped. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped into the kitchen. He stood by the counter, loosening his tie, his jaw tight. "You didn't make dinner," he said, not looking at me. "I was working," I replied, gesturing toward the workshop. "Lost track of time." He snorted, opening the fridge. "Working. Right. Carving your little projects while I'm out there actually keeping us afloat." He grabbed a beer, the bottle clinking against the shelf. "Claire closed $1 million deal today. $1 million. And you're here. What, playing with wood?" I froze, the bronze key still in my pocket, its edges pressing into my thigh. His words weren't new, but they hit differently tonight. Maybe it was the way he said playing like my craft was a child's game. Maybe it was Claire's name again, like a benchmark I'd never meet. Or maybe it was the exhaustion of pretending I was okay. "I'm not playing," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. "This is my work, Ethan. It matters to me." He turned, beer in hand, and gave me a look that was half pity, half irritation. "It's a hobby, Nora. It's not a career. You want to matter, do something that actually counts." He brushed past me, heading for the living room, leaving me standing there with my pulse hammering. I didn't follow him. I walked back to the workshop, closed the door, and leaned against it, my breath shaky. The key was still in my pocket, and I pulled it out, holding it up to the light. Mom's voice echoed in my head. "It opens you." I didn't know what that meant anymore, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this, shrinking, apologizing, hoping Ethan would see me again. That night, I made a decision. Not to leave, not yet, but to stop hiding from the truth. I started paying attention. I checked the bank app on my phone, noticing withdrawals. I hadn't made $200 here, $500 there, labeled miscellaneous. I found another receipt in his briefcase, this one for a hotel in Portland, 2 nights, 1 room. My stomach churned, but I didn't cry. I folded the receipt and tucked it into a drawer next to the bronze key. Whatever Ethan was doing, whoever he was doing it with, I wasn't going to be the last to know. Not anymore. The next few weeks felt like walking on a frozen lake, each step careful, waiting for the ice to crack. I kept carving in my workshop, the rhythmic scrape of my tools, a tether to sanity, but my eyes were sharper now, my ears tuned to every creak of our life. Ethan's absences grew bolder. Dinners, missed weekends at the office, his phone buzzing at midnight with messages he'd swipe away before I could glance over. The bronze key stayed in my pocket, a quiet reminder of Mom's words. "It opens you." I wasn't sure what I was unlocking yet, but I was done being the woman who looked away. I started small, piecing together the puzzle of Ethan's lies. Our joint bank account was my first stop. I'd never paid much attention before Ethan handled the finances, always saying, "Don't worry, I've got it." But now I logged in daily, scrolling through transactions with a knot in my stomach. There were cash withdrawals I couldn't explain, $300, at an ATM in Portland, $450, at a jewelry store in Brunswick. I found a charge for a seafood restaurant we'd never been to, $180, for 2 dated a Friday night, when Ethan claimed he was at a team building event. I printed the statements, tucking them in the drawer, with the hotel receipt, the key pressed against them like a guard. The perfume on his scarf wasn't a one-time thing either. It lingered on his coats, a sharp floral scent that wasn't mine. I'd stand in our closet holding his jackets, feeling like a stranger in my own home. One night, I found a folded note in his blazer pocket, just a scrap of paper, but the handwriting wasn't his. "Meet me at the Anchor, 8 p.m. See, the Anchor was a swanky bar in Portland, all velvet booths and overpriced cocktails. We'd never gone there together. I stared at the sea, my mind flashing to Claire, the golden colleague Ethan couldn't stop praising. I didn't cry. I took a photo of the note and added it to my growing pile of evidence. Ethan's words cut deeper as the days passed. He'd come home late, reeking of that perfume, and toss barbs like they were nothing. "You're still up tinkering with your wood," he'd say, kicking off his shoes. "Claire's team just landed a huge client. That's real work, Nora." Each jab chipped away at me, but I stopped arguing back. I'd learned silence was safer. It let me watch, listen, plan. I started checking his briefcase when he was in the shower, finding business cards for places we'd never discussed, like a real estate agent in Kennebunk. Why would a banker need a realtor an hour away? My gut twisted, but I kept my face neutral, my hands steady. I tried to hold on to the Nora, I used to be the one who believed in us. I'd cook Ethan's favorite meals, roasted cod with lemon blueberry pie, from scratch, hoping some part of him would soften. One night, I set the table with candles, thinking maybe we could talk, really talk. He walked in at 10 p.m., tie loose, and barely glanced at the spread. I ate with clients, he said, grabbing a glass of water. You didn't need to do all this. He didn't sit down. I stood there, the pie cooling the candles, dripping wax, and felt like I was begging for scraps of a man who'd already left. The worst came during a rare moment we were both home a rainy Sunday afternoon. I was sketching a new chair design, the bronze key on the table beside me, when Ethan stormed in, phone in hand. You checked the bank account, he snapped. I looked up, heart racing. I'd been careful always logging out, but maybe I'd slipped. Just balancing the budget, I said, keeping my voice even. Why? Something wrong. His eyes narrowed. You don't need to poke around. I handle the money, Nora. Stick to your... whatever this is. He gestured at my sketchbook like it was trash. Claire says couples who don't trust each other end up miserable. Maybe she's right. I gripped the key under the table, its edges biting into my palm. Maybe she's right, I echoed, forcing a smile. Trust is everything, isn't it? He didn't catch the edge in my voice. He just nodded like I'd agreed with him and walked out. That was the moment I stopped hoping. I didn't want to save our marriage anymore. I wanted to save myself. The turning point came on a foggy Tuesday morning. I'd driven to Portland to deliver a carved headboard to a client, the key tucked in my jacket. On a whim, I stopped by Ethan's bank, a glass and steel building that always felt too cold. I told the teller I needed to review our joint account for tax purposes, a half-truth that got me into a small office with a manager named Susan. She pulled up the account, her fingers clicking on the keyboard, and frowned. There's been some unusual activity, she said. Large transfers to an external account initiated last week. Were you aware? My mouth went dry. No. How much? $10,000 split into 3 transfers. The recipients listed as C. Bennett. Susan's voice was neutral, but her eyes were kind, like she'd seen this before. I swallowed my mind, locking on to C. Bennett. Claire. It had to be. I asked for a printout, my hands trembling, as I folded it into my bag. Susan hesitated, then added, There's something else. Your name's attached to another account, not joint. It's been dormant for years. Would you like me to check it? I nodded, confused. She typed, then paused, her eyebrows lifting. It's an escrow account tied to an estate in France. Vineyard, I think. Valued at... She turned the screen toward me. $12 million. Sole beneficiary Nora Callahan. I stared at the number, my pulse roaring in my ears. That's not possible, I whispered. I'd never heard of a vineyard, never had family in France. Susan printed a summary, her voice gentle. It's linked to a Diane Moreau, deceased. Maybe a relative you'd need a lawyer to verify. I left the bank in a daze, the key heavy in my pocket. Diane Moreau. The name sparked a faint memory, Mom mentioning a distant aunt, a recluse who'd cut ties with the family. I'd been a kid, barely listening. Could she have left me something this massive? And why hadn't I known? I drove home, the printouts burning a hole in my bag. Ethan didn't know about the vineyard. He couldn't. But he'd been moving money, hiding things, building a life I wasn't part of. That night, I sat in my workshop, the key on the workbench, glinting like a challenge. I opened my laptop and searched for Olivia Harper, a family lawyer I'd met at a craft fair years ago. Her card was still in my desk, creased but legible. I dialed her number, my voice steady for the first time in months. Olivia, it's Nora Callahan. I need your help. My husband's trying to screw me over, and I just found out I might own a vineyard in France. Her laugh was warm, sharp. Nora, you've got my attention. Tell me everything. I did. The receipts, the transfers, the perfume, Claire. The vineyard I didn't understand. Olivia listened, then said, We'll start with the bank records and the estate. If Ethan's moving money without your consent, that's financial misconduct. And if this vineyard's real, it's yours alone, separate property under Maine law. He can't touch it. But we need to move fast. I hung up my chest lighter than it had been in years. The key gleamed under the lamp, and I picked it up, turning it over in my fingers. Mom was right. It was opening something, not a door, but me. I wasn't just Ethan's wife, the hobbyist he mocked. I was Nora Callahan, and I was done playing small. Whatever Ethan was planning, whoever Claire was to him, they were about to learn I wasn't as breakable as they thought. The fog clung to Harpswell's cliffs like a shroud as I drove to Portland for the meeting Olivia had arranged. My workshop had been quiet for days, my tools untouched, the half-finished table gathering dust. I couldn't carve, not with my mind spinning over what I'd learned, a $12 million vineyard in France, a secret Ethan didn't know, and his secret, a $10,000 transfer to Claire Bennett, siphoned from our joint account. The bronze key hung on a chain around my neck, now its weight steadying me. Mom's words echoed. It opens you. Today, it was opening a door to the truth, and I was ready to walk through. Olivia met me at a sleek law office downtown. Her sharp blazer and sharper smile, a stark contrast to the knot in my stomach. She'd spent the last week digging, and her findings were a bombshell. The vineyard was real, inherited from Diane Moreau, my mother's estranged aunt, who'd left it to me in a will I'd never seen. The estate included a chateau and 50 acres of vines in Bordeaux, untouched since Diane's death a decade ago. Olivia had verified it through a French notary, solely in my name, untouchable by Ethan under Maine law. But that wasn't the only surprise. Olivia's investigator had tracked the money Ethan moved. It wasn't just a gift to Claire. It was part of a scheme. And Claire wasn't just his mistress, she was his partner in crime. Ethan's been funneling money to a shell account, Olivia explained, sliding a folder across her desk. Claire's name is on it, but he's the one pulling the strings. They've been planning to buy a condo in Kennebunk, $800,000, half paid in cash from your joint funds. He's been forging your signature on transfer approvals. I stared at the documents, my breath catching. Forgery, theft, the receipts, the perfume, the late nights, they weren't just an affair. They were a calculated betrayal. How did he think he'd get away with this? I asked, my voice tight. Olivia leaned back, her eyes gleaming. Arrogance. He assumed you'd never check, never fight. He's been telling Claire you're checked out, that you'd sign anything to avoid conflict. But he didn't count on you, Nora. Or me. I touched the key at my chest, its edges grounding me. Ethan had underestimated me for years, but today he'd learn what I was made of. Olivia had set up a meeting with Ethan and Claire at a neutral conference room, posing it as a financial review to avoid tipping them off. She'd also subpoenaed bank records and hired a forensic accountant to trace every cent. We're not just stopping him, she said. We're exposing him. You ready? I nodded, my jaw set. Let's do this. The conference room was all glass and steel cold, as Ethan's eyes when he walked in. Claire was with him, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her navy dress screaming money. She smiled at me, a practiced pitying curve of her lips, like I was a stray she'd found on the street. Ethan didn't meet my gaze, his fingers tapping the table, betraying his nerves. Olivia sat beside me, her laptop open, a stack of folders in front of her. The air was thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. Thanks for coming, Olivia began, her voice smooth as a blade. We're here to discuss irregularities in the Callahan joint account, as well as Nora's estate. Let's start with the $10,000 transferred to Ms. Bennett's account. Ethan's head snapped up. That was a loan, he said too quickly. For a client project. Nora knew about it. I raised an eyebrow, my heart pounding, but my face calm. Did I funny? I don't recall signing off on that. Or the $50,000 you moved last month to a real estate escrow in Kennebunk. Claire's smile faltered. Ethan's face flushed. What are you talking about? He stammered. That's not... Olivia cut him off, sliding a bank statement across the table. It's all here. transfers, forged signatures, and a paper trail leading to a condo you two planned to buy. Nora's name was on every document, Ethan, but she didn't sign a thing. That's fraud. And in Maine, it's a felony. Claire's hand shot to her purse like she might bolt. This is a misunderstanding, she said, her voice high. I didn't know. Didn't know, I interrupted, my voice steady, the key warm against my skin. You didn't know Ethan was married, or that the money you were spending wasn't his, because I have receipts, Claire. Dinners, hotels, a $2,000 bracelet from Portland Jewelers. All paid from our account. Ethan's eyes darted to Claire, panic creeping in. You told me you cleared this with her? He hissed. Claire's face twisted. And there it was, the twist I hadn't seen coming. Cleared it, she snapped, turning on him. You said Nora was leaving you, that the money was your bonus. You lied to me, Ethan. The room went silent, the weight of their mutual betrayal hanging like smoke. Olivia didn't miss a beat. She opened her laptop, projecting emails between Ethan and a realtor detailing their plan to flip the condo for profit after cutting Nora out. Then came the kicker, a text from Claire to Ethan dated last week. Once she's gone, we split the sale 50-50. Don't screw this up. I leaned forward, locking eyes with Ethan. You thought I was too weak to notice, didn't you? Too busy playing with wood to see you stealing from me. But I'm not the one who's screwed here. Olivia dropped the final bomb. There's another matter. Nora is the sole beneficiary of an estate in France, a vineyard and chateau valued at $12 million. It's separate property Ethan acquired before your marriage. You have no claim to it. But you do have a claim to the fraud charges we're filing unless you agree to a clean divorce and full restitution. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed, his face ashen. Claire stood her chair, scraping, and grabbed her purse. I'm not part of this, she said, voice shaking. You deal with him. Sit down, Ms. Bennett, Olivia said, her tone icy. You're named in the lawsuit, accessory to fraud plus civil damages. Leave, and I'll have the police meet you at your office. Claire sank back into her seat, tears welling. Ethan stared at the table, his hands clenched. For the first time in years, I saw him small, not the confident banker, not the man who'd mocked my work, but a coward caught in his own trap. I touched the key again, its clover shape a silent promise. I wasn't just winning. I was free. Sign the divorce papers, I said, sliding a folder across the table. Return the money you stole, and maybe, just maybe, you'll avoid jail. Ethan's eyes met mine, searching for the Nora he could manipulate. She wasn't there. He picked up the pen, his hand shaking, and signed. Claire's head dropped, her perfect bun unraveling. Olivia gathered the papers, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. We'll be in touch about the restitution, she said. Nora, let's go. I stood, the key glinting at my chest, and walked out without looking back. The fog had lifted outside the Portland skyline, sharp against a rare blue sky. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The weeks after the meeting felt like waking from a long, bruising dream. The Portland fog gave way to Harpswell's crisp autumn light, the cliffs glowing gold under a sun that seemed to burn brighter. I moved out of our cottage the day after Ethan signed the papers, leaving behind the kitchen where I'd cooked meals. He never ate the bed where I'd lain awake, listening to his lies. I rented a small house on Bailey Island, a cedar-shingled bungalow with a porch facing the sea. The bronze key hung around my neck, its clover shape catching the light, as I unpacked boxes, each one a step toward a life that was mine alone. Olivia worked fast. The divorce was finalized in record time thanks to Ethan's signature and the mountain of evidence we'd piled against him. Under Maine law, the vineyard, my $12 million inheritance from Diane Moreau, was untouchable, a separate property he couldn't claim. The joint account was another story. Olivia's forensic accountant traced every cent Ethan had siphoned, and the court ordered full restitution, $62,000, including the condo down payment and Claire's bracelet. Ethan's bank launched an internal investigation, and within days, he was fired for ethics violations. Word spread fast in Harpswell's tight-knit circles. His reputation was ash before the leaves fell. Claire didn't fare much better. She tried to play the victim, claiming Ethan had duped her, but Olivia's lawsuit pinned her as an accessory to fraud. Her firm sidelined her, and last I heard, she'd moved to Boston, tail between her legs, her LinkedIn profile scrubbed of the investment starboss Ethan loved to parrot. I didn't gloat. Their downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was the quiet of my new home, the salt air on my skin, the freedom to carve without someone sneering over my shoulder. I went back to my workshop, not the old one, but a new space I'd set up in the bungalow's garage. The tools were the same, but the energy was different. I started carving again, not to fill the silence, but to create something real. My first project was a rocking chair, its arms inlaid with abalone shells that shimmered like the ocean at dusk. I listed it online, and it sold in hours for $2,000. Then came orders for tables, benches, even a custom cradle for a couple in Brunswick. My craft, the hobby Ethan mocked, was paying my bills, $8,000 in the first month alone. I opened a shop on Etsy, calling it Clover Key Creations, a nod to the bronze key that had guided me through. The vineyard was still a mystery, but Olivia connected me with a French lawyer, Julien, who sent photos of the chateau, ivy-covered stone rows of vines stretching toward the horizon. It felt like a fairy tale, too big to grasp, but I wasn't ready to sell. Julien suggested leasing the vines to a local winery, which brought in $50,000 a month, more than enough to cover my mortgage, and then some. I didn't need the money to live, but it gave me something Ethan never could: security on my terms. I wasn't alone in my new life. Lila, my best friend from college, showed up one weekend with a suitcase and a bottle of Pinot. She'd left a dead-end job in Augusta, and a boyfriend who loved her, but not enough to show up. We'd lost touch over the years, but when I texted her about the divorce, she replied, "In seconds, I'm coming. You're not doing this alone." Lila moved into the bungalow's spare room, and we fell into a rhythm. Me carving her painting seascapes, both of us laughing over burnt dinners and late-night talks on the porch. She was the sister I'd never had, her presence a reminder that family isn't always blood. One afternoon, we drove to the Harpswell Farmers Market, the key glinting at my chest as I loaded our basket with apples and fresh bread. A woman named Nora, who sold pottery, recognized me from my Etsy shop. "You're the wood carver," she said, her eyes bright. "Your work's stunning. Want to join our co-op? We're all artisans, no middlemen, just makers supporting makers." I said yes on the spot. The co-op became my community: potters, weavers, glass blowers, all trading tips and splitting booth fees at craft fairs. For the first time, I wasn't just Nora, Ethan's wife. I was Nora the artist, the woman who built beauty from raw wood. Ethan tried to crawl back once. He showed up at the bungalow unannounced, a month after the divorce, his Audi parked crookedly on my gravel drive. He looked like a ghost of himself, tie-loose eyes, bloodshot, holding a cheap bouquet of daisies, like a peace offering. "Nora," he started, voice hoarse. "I messed up. Claire was a mistake. You were always the real thing. Can we talk?" I stood on the porch, the key warm against my skin, and felt nothing. No anger, no ache. Just clarity. "Talk," I said, crossing my arms. "You mean beg? Because that's what this is, Ethan. You're not here for me. You're here because you lost everything, and you think I'll save you." His face crumpled. "I know I hurt you, but we had something good once. Don't you miss it?" I laughed, soft but sharp. "Miss it? I miss the man I thought you were, but he doesn't exist. You made sure of that." I stepped back, hand on the door. "Go home, Ethan. There's nothing for you here." He left without another word, the daisies wilting on his passenger seat. I watched his car disappear, then went inside and hung the bronze key on a hook by the front door. It wasn't just a symbol anymore, it was a promise kept. Mom had been right. It had opened me not to a man or a marriage, but to myself. That night, Lila and I sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, the sea whispering below. She raised her glass of wine, her grin wide. To Nora Callahan, she said, the baddest woodcarver in Maine, who took a liar and turned him into a lesson. I clinked my glass against hers, the key catching the moonlight from its hook inside. To starting over, I said, and never looking back. The waves rolled in, steady and sure, and I knew this was just the beginning. The sun dipped low over Bailey Island, painting the sea in shades of amber and rose. I stood on the rocky shore below my bungalow, the bronze key hanging on its chain around my neck, catching the last light. The waves lapped at my bare feet, cold and alive, whispering a rhythm that felt like home. It had been 3 months since the divorce, 3 months since I'd left behind the Nora, who shrank to fit Ethan's world. Now, with the salt air in my lungs and the weight of my own choices in my hands, I was finally whole. My life on the island had bloomed in ways I hadn't dared imagine. Clover Key Creations wasn't just an Etsy shop anymore, it was a brand. My rocking chairs and tables with their ocean-inspired inlays were selling faster than I could carve them. Last week, a gallery in Portland offered to feature my work in a summer exhibit, calling it raw, soulful craftsmanship. I'd laughed when I read the email, thinking of Ethan's sneers about my hobby. My income had steadied at $12,000 a month, enough to buy a second-hand truck and start saving for a studio of my own. The vineyard's lease brought in more, but I tucked that away, still unsure if I'd ever visit the chateau in Bordeaux. For now, Maine was enough. Lila and I had turned the bungalow into a haven. We'd painted the walls, sage green hung her seascapes alongside my carved panels, and built a fire pit on the bluff for nights when the stars felt close enough to touch. The Harpswell Artisan Co-op was my second family. Now Mara the potter taught me to throw clay. Jonah the glassblower swapped stories of failed loves over coffee. We'd set up a booth at the Brunswick Craft Fair, our tables overflowing with pottery glass and wood. When a customer bought my abalone inlaid bench for $3,500, Mara slung an arm around me and said, "Nora, you're not just making art, you're making a life." I'd started writing too, not for fame, but for clarity. I launched a blog, The Clover Key, where I shared my journey, the years of doubt, the betrayal, the vineyard that changed everything. I wrote about carving, about the way a chisel finds the grain's truth, and how I'd found my own. The posts resonated. Women from across the country left comments. I left my husband last month. Your story gave me courage. I'm 50 and starting over. Thank you for showing it's possible. I read each one, my heart full, knowing I wasn't alone, and neither were they. Ethan faded into a footnote. I heard through the co-op's gossip vine that he'd moved to Augusta, working a low-level job at a credit union, his charm buried under the weight of his mistakes. He sent one email a month ago, a rambling apology I didn't answer. I didn't know what I had he wrote. I deleted it, not out of anger, but because his words no longer held power. Claire's name never surfaced again, and I didn't care to look. Their story was over. Mine was just beginning. One evening, as the first chill of October settled over the island, Lila and I sat by the fire pit, wrapped in wool blankets. The bronze key hung on its hook by the door, now visible through the window, a quiet sentinel. Lila sipped her tea, her eyes on the flames. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if Ethan hadn't shown his true colors?" she asked. I leaned back, the sea's murmur filling the silence. I'd probably still be in that cottage sanding tables to please him, thinking that's what love looks like. I wouldn't know I could build this. I gestured to the bungalow, the fire, the life we'd carved together. Lila nodded, her smile soft. "Sometimes you have to lose the wrong thing to find the right one. You found you." Her words settled deep, like the key's weight against my chest. I'd spent years afraid of being alone, afraid my worth depended on a man's approval. But alone wasn't lonely. It was freedom. It was waking up to a day I could shape, choosing who to love, what to create, how to live. I didn't need Ethan's validation or anyone's. I was enough. The next morning, I sat at my desk, the key back around my neck, and wrote a final blog post. I called it "The Weight of a Key," pouring out the lessons I'd learned, that love doesn't demand you shrink, that betrayal can be a doorway, that a woman's value lies in her courage to claim her own life. I ended with a call to my readers. If you're holding on to something that dims you, let it go. The life waiting on the other side is worth it. Trust me, I'm living it. I hit publish, then walked to the shore, the key glinting in the dawn. The tide was coming in waves curling over the rocks, and I stood there barefoot, letting the cold ground me. I thought of Mom, her cryptic gift, her belief in a strength I hadn't seen until now. I thought of the Nora who doubted herself, and the Nora who'd fought back, chisel in hand, heart open. The sea stretched endless before me, and for the first time I felt as vast as its horizon. I turned back to the bungalow where Lila was brewing coffee, where my tools waited, where the key hung like a promise kept. This was my home, not a place, but a feeling. Peace, wholeness, me. I'd lost a marriage, a man, a version of myself I'd outgrown. In their place, I'd found something better, the freedom to be Nora Callahan, unapologetically, gloriously me.